The results of last night's primary election. I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm Celestia Sherman. We'll also talk with Texas Monthly senior writer Michael Hardy, who will discuss his in-depth article on Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo.
And I'm Frank Billingsley, plus Edward Staudenmayer from the cast of the national touring production of The Great Gatsby will stop by to tell us about the show now playing at the Hobby Center.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870. Or you can email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And don't forget, you can watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org.
All that and more right here on Hello Houston after the news from NPR and News 88.7.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The U.S. and Israel continue to strike targets across Iran. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Iran's Navy has been destroyed and senior military leaders have been killed. NPR's Greg Myrie reports Tehran is still launching retaliatory attacks across parts of the Middle East, but its ability to strike back appears to be weakening.
They say those capabilities are being degraded by the day. Now, Hegseth acknowledged that Iran will still be able to shoot missiles. It's been targeting U.S. embassies and civilians throughout the region. But thousands and missiles and drones have been shot down by the U.S. Forces and other countries in the region. So there's this significant reduction in Iranian fire.
That's NPR's Greg Myrie reporting. Turkey says a ballistic munition that was headed toward its airspace from Iran has been shot down. Officials say there were no injuries. As Dori Buscarin reports, it's a sign that Turkey could be drawn into the growing conflict.
The munition traveled from Iran over Iraqi and Syrian airspace before being shot down by a NATO missile defense system, according to a statement from the Turkish Ministry of National Defense. Fragments from the interceptor landed in the southern province of Hatay, about an hour's drive from the U.S. Incirlik Air Force Base. The Defense Ministry says it continues to reserve the right to respond to any hostile act against the country, and that it will continue consultations with NATO and its allies. NATO spokesperson Alison Hart condemned the attack and said that NATO stands firmly with all allies, including Turkey. For NPR News, I'm Dori Buscarin, Istanbul.
The Senate is expected to vote later today on a war powers resolution that would limit President Trump's ability to continue military action against Iran. The measure would require congressional approval for further U.S. involvement in the conflict. The race for control of Congress is starting to take shape. NPR's Domenico Montanaro reports voters in Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas held the first primaries of the midterm season yesterday.
Two key Senate races are starting to take shape. In North Carolina, it's a former Trump Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Whatley against former Governor Roy Cooper. Cooper is seen as a big get for Democrats, but remember, this is a state that Trump won 3 times, which may be why Cooper kept his distance from his party, referring to himself as someone who would be a, quote, independent senator. In Texas, James Tallarico won the Democratic primary, but he's going to have to wait a little longer to find out who his Republican opponent is. No candidate got 50% in the bitter primary between Senator John Cornyn and State Attorney General Ken Paxton, so the winner will be decided in a May 26th runoff. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. 2 Democrats in Congress are headed to a runoff against one another in Texas's 18th congressional district. Christian Menifee, who was sworn in after a special election last year, received more votes than his opponent, Al Green, but not enough to avoid a runoff. Green was not in Houston on Tuesday night. He was in Washington for a briefing on the Iran war, but spoke with Houston Public Media earlier in the evening.
And I'm here because this is my job. This is what the people expect me to do. I would dearly like to be there. This is election night. I'll have a lot of friends and constituents gathering, but I have to be here and we have to vote.
Menifee, addressing supporters Tuesday night, did not mince words about his opponent.
Al Green, you can tear us down, but I'm going to build us up. I'm focused on taking this district to the future, and I will not lose my integrity for no damn elected office.
At last check, Menifee had 46% of the vote. Green had 44%, with 98% of votes counted, according to the Associated Press. Houston area Congressman Dan Crenshaw has been unseated in the Republican primary for Texas's 2nd Congressional District. He lost to State Representative Steve Toth. Crenshaw has broken with President Trump on multiple occasions. He was the only House Republican seeking re-election in Texas that did not receive Trump's endorsement. In Galveston County, Mark Henry is the GOP nominee for Galveston County Judge. His challenger, Chris Kennard, was looking to unseat the longtime judge, citing a need for change. Henry says he's ready to run for a 5th term.
We're very relieved, I guess, but it's not unexpected. We've been doing really well. We've done a good job. We've done what we said we would do, and the voters rewarded us with another term.
Henry will face the sole Democratic challenger, Albert Smith, in the upcoming November election. And former Sugar Land City Council member Daniel Wong unseated incumbent KP George, winning the Republican nomination for Fort Bend County Judge. With all precincts reporting, Daniel Wong took home 54% of ballots cast. On the Democratic side, County Commissioner Dexter McCoy and Associate Judge Rochelle Carter are headed to a runoff. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include FJC, a foundation of donor-advised funds working to maximize the impact of charitable giving and to create customized philanthropic solutions. Learn more at fjc.org.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
And good morning,
Good morning.
everyone. Yawn late
Good
night.
morning.
Yeah, you did a great job last night.
Yeah.
Well, it was a big lift here at the station, and we were on live 8 till 10 o'clock with election results. And the surprise thing is, when we went off the air, there was still a lot to learn.
Oh, yeah. Well,
It was a late night for election results, and
that's kind of good. I mean, doesn't that say something about our society right now?
it's good. The turnout says a lot about
The
our
turnout's
society.
amazing.
The late results were more of, there were some problems. The long lines here in Harris County helped, and so they couldn't release numbers until the last voter had voted, and those lines were pretty long, and so well into, I guess, the 10 o'clock hour, they were still saying there were polls open and people were voting.
We also had a very long ballot. I mean, it
Oh
was
my God,
pages after
114
pages, 117. Yeah, right.
Races
so,
on one side.
so it was one of those things where I think it was just a big lift in general when we're looking at a primary election.
But what I saw was the closeness of these races. That
That
means
is
you're
what's
going to have to
fascinating.
fight for my vote. You're going to have to convince me to vote for you.
Yeah.
You're not just going to get it because you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or you're this color or that color or sex identity. It's just, it's about, we all are in the race together, sort of.
Yeah. We have Andrew Schneider joining us, who I've spent a lot of time with over the last 24 hours, and he'll be in just a moment. He's sitting across from us right now, but he'll be joining the conversation to take us through a lot of the surprises and the things we found out and learned. But while we were doing that, you folks had already done your civic duty and had voted, and you got to go to the theater.
The Great
was
Gatsby.
great.
We're going to talk about that today.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I've never, God love them, but man, I waited a long time for my car. It takes a while whenever the theater was packed. And as the curtain went down, everybody's rushing out of there. And now I know why. They want to give their ticket to the valet.
And the valet was actually closed when I got there. So.
There
you go. So it was packed.
Yeah, no, it was a full house. Sure was. So and the weather is going to deteriorate as we go toward the weekend.
Before we even get to that, yesterday gave us a nice weather day for voting.
Good point.
And so that helps encourage people to come out, and those lines they had to wait in some places, at least they had comfortable weather to do it in.
And it's going to be comfortable all the way through, but the rain chances are going to increase as we go into Friday and Saturday and Sunday, especially Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah. When you say that, how bad is it going to look Saturday or Sunday? Saturday night, are we going doing outdoor things?
No, we can see some fairly steady, heavy rain. There's a front that's going to slowly push push through. And, we're used to fronts coming in and coming out.
Yeah.
And now as we get closer to summer, they always start to slow down until they finally stop about mid-May. So this one, in fact, there's a front out to our west, which is why we're getting the cloud cover that we're getting right now. But that one's not the one that's going to come through. It's going to linger for 3 or 4 days, and then another one, a little stronger, is going to sort of push its way in, but it's not strong enough to push its way in quickly, so it's going to be a mess.
All right. Temperatures today?
82 for a high.
Okay.
Not bad. It's comfortable.
Also, we've been talking a lot about politics. Celeste, you did an in-depth with Lina Hidalgo not that long ago on cold coffee, and there is a fascinating article in Texas Monthly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's basically interesting because the way the author points it, and the title of it is The Rise and Fall. So I'm very interested to get into a deep dive of what that rise and fall actually
I noticed
was.
that too. That's an interesting
kind of
way
to
say
that, to
introduce
anyone, given the fact that she is so young. And so it's going to be very interesting to see and hear what he has to say about it. But I am interested because I did have a very in-depth, long conversation with her. You can go to YouTube and watch that. And it was interesting to hear what she had to say. I think at that moment, during that time, she knew she's in December, she wraps up her time. And I think she's in a reflective place, but also still having to get work done. And that's a hard spot
it's a
to
funny
be in.
thing because so many people were talking about the race for county judge and what we saw play out last night. And people keep forgetting she's still in office till December. She's got a lot of time.
And she did not endorse anybody. And then there was also a lot of questions around she had endorsed Christian Menifee in the special runoff election. And then going into it, she then turned around and endorsed Al Green.
Yeah.
So for this election, so in the primary,
yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to chat with the author of that.
So
I don't think it's a permanent downfall.
No, I don't either.
I don't even know if it's a downfall. It's a shift.
I don't even know if it's a fall-ish.
Yeah.
But I
said shift.
My question, one of the main questions that I want to understand is, does he say that this is a rise and fall of Lina Hidalgo and we're looking at this from a personal perspective, or are we looking at this more of a fall of the potential for progressive young talent to come through the lines within Texas politics?
I don't know. Then you see Christian Menifee really rising up.
I do think that there is a broader question here in general. And even as we look to what was happening last night and we continue to see results coming out, we're seeing a lot of changes happening. And are we in a moment?
Yeah. Well, we're going to find that out. That's coming up still on today's show. But right now, we're going to go right into the headlines, which happen to dovetail nicely in what we're chatting about.
As we have been watching and discussing big headlines from last night's primary election, I'm going to run through them. State Representative James Tallarico defeated U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett in the Democratic race. It was a big night, that is for sure. And in the Republican primary for U.S. Senate, John Cornyn and Ken Paxton are headed to a runoff to decide who will carry the GOP nomination. In Houston's 18th congressional district, U.S. Representative Al Green and Christian Menifee appear to be on track for a Democratic primary runoff in May, setting up what could be a fourth election in just 7 months for voters there. In another closely watched race, State Representative Steve Toth defeated incumbent Congressman Dan Crenshaw, which we got to ask ourselves, was that an upset? In the Republican primary for the Texas Agriculture Commissioner, Nate Sheets unseated three-term incumbent Sid Miller, and former state senator Don Huffines won the GOP primary for Texas Comptroller. Meanwhile, in the race for Harris County Judge, former Houston Mayor Nice Parker appears headed to a runoff with former Houston City Council member Letitia Plummer. And as Ernie mentioned, joining us now to break it down for us is Houston Public Media politics reporter Andrew Schneider. And if you have questions and want to join the conversation about on last night's results, you can call or text 713-440-8870. Now, Andrew, before we started, we were all discussing voter turnout. And something that we're seeing is from both the Republican and Democratic side during this primary, huge numbers, more on the Democratic side, does that mean anything in general? What does that tell us about the polls?
It's really difficult to read anything into the general election from what the turnout is in the primaries. We've had several primaries over the past several cycles where the Democrats have turned out in larger numbers than Republicans, and it hasn't translated to Democrats winning statewide in any of those cases. In fact, Democrats haven't won statewide in Texas in more than 30 years. So, it's encouraging in a state that is well known for having relatively low turnout to see strong numbers in both sides. It shows people are engaged in the political process. But in terms of being able to make forecasts for what that's going to mean in November, it's very difficult to do.
But I do think, and I understand that you're saying that it's hard to essentially see this as an indicator to the general election, but there were some notable outcomes, and I think that are very interesting, even if you are not from Texas, but you're looking at this from a national standpoint. The U.S. Senate race between Tallarico and Crockett. Tallarico beat Crockett at 53 to 46%, and he's already, pulled from, his strategy was to pull from independents, moderates, even some Republicans. Is this an indicator on how Democrats will do moving into a general election?
Well, Tallarico, the main argument that he made throughout the primary campaign was that he was in a better position to reach across the aisle and to bring in people who are disaffected or people who are not typically Democratic voters. He made that argument on the basis of having previously flipped a district that had gone for Trump by a rather large margin in the state house. Jasmine Crockett's argument was that she could encourage Democratic turnout in larger numbers than people that would be inclined to vote Democratic in a general election, but just generally hadn't previously voted. I think he proved pretty decisively that his argument was the one that would carry the day. The question is whether that translates into his being able to lure votes away from the eventual Republican nominee.
Well, while we're on that subject, there was an ad that I kept seeing. They said if Jasmine Crockett is elected, it's a gift to the Republicans. Do you see that out on television?
I saw that ad in constant rotation.
So do you think that has something to do with it? And if so, now he's poised. He better deliver.
I think that certainly is as an underlying theme of people that support him. If you watch that ad through to the end, you saw that it was not sponsored by his campaign. It was by a group aligned to his campaign. I would say that there were some other factors that were involved than simply that ad. Not the least of which was the interview that he gave with Stephen Colbert that never aired on the Late Show, but still managed to get tremendous rotation on YouTube. Went viral, and it proved, among other things, if you really want somebody to watch something, tell them that they can't. They will find a way.
Well, and the thing is, even the watching it or not watching it, it was that it got all the national attention in the news story. So you didn't even have to see the interview to know this was going on. And that was, in a sense, a gift to him for name recognition.
And it probably translated into more donations.
Oh, a boatload, 2.5 million.
In 24 hours.
Yes. I mean, there was a group called Ad Impact that was running numbers on spending on the Senate primary, both sides. As of last Friday, collectively they had spent over $122 million, which completely demolished the previous record for spending in a U.S. Senate primary. And we've still got another 2.5 months to go on this race because the Republicans have not chosen a candidate yet.
Well, and I read that Greg Abbott spent more on Jasmine Crockett's campaign to try to get her elected than she spent on her own campaign.
I couldn't speak to that.
But, we've seen this before, I think, in Texas politics, right? And we know Beto O'Rourke. We had that kind of momentum coming behind him. He was making a national name for himself. And yet we always see this fall short. Does this feel any different from something that we've seen in the past?
I think it's really going to depend on what the outcome is in the runoff in the Republican Senate primary, because most of the polling that I've seen up until now suggests that the Democratic nominee, and now we know it's James Tallarico, stands a better chance against Ken Paxton in the general election than against John Cornyn. John Cornyn is extremely well funded. He's shown a willingness and an ability to spend that money very strategically, and it played no small role in his finishing first in the race that's going to a second round in May. If Cornyn is the nominee eventually, whether or not he's able to bring Paxton voters behind him, he's arguably a more formidable opponent.
However, I do want to make note, when we're looking at the Republican primary for U.S. Senate, Cornyn and Paxton obviously are headed to a runoff. Cornyn typically has basically had no problem cruising through to a re-election. We didn't see that this primary. It was close. They're headed to a runoff. What does that say to Cornyn?
Cornyn needs to find some way of bringing in people that didn't vote for him in the first round and bring them back to the general, and that's going to be. It's going to be a heavy lift for the simple reason that some extremely bitter advertising has gone back and forth. A lot of ugly charges, some of them with merit, some of them without. The primary argument that was being made against him during the first round by both people aligned with Paxton and the Hunt campaign was that he was not sufficiently supportive of President Trump. Cornyn, of course, made the argument, look, I voted with the president 99% of the time. I support his agenda. I want to be able to see that through to the end of his term. It's going to be harder to reconcile that after another 2 months of ugly campaigning.
Yeah. Well, I want to go, let me just jump in here right before we lose the thread there with the Tallarico and the Democratic primary. I'm curious, word is, and because in Texas we don't have to declare a party, we just pick a party to vote for in a primary. You're not assigned a party that you stay with forever. You can switch back and forth. That many Republicans and independents went to the polls and chose the Democratic primary to vote in, and those that are disenfranchised from the Republican Party or weren't happy with the way the Republican Party has gone, so that we saw this larger number on the Democratic side voting. Do the people that make that choice in primaries, do they tend to shift back to their usual allegiance when you get to the general? Those that may have crossed over and voted Democrat in the primary may go back to a Cornyn in the general.
I haven't seen any studies that actually look at strategically voting in the opposing party's primary in terms of how that translates to the general election. I will say that the thing that you need to keep in mind is that if you vote in one party's primary in the first round, you have to stick with that in the second round. You can't say, well, now that I got the desired outcome in the Democratic race, I'm going to go cast my ballot in the Republican second round.
And you're talking about in the runoff. You do. When you get to the general, you're free again to do as you wish.
In the general, you can vote for whomever you want or not vote at all.
Well, and I was just going to say, back to this Cornyn issue, what stands out from his ads with me is no Sharia law in Texas. And I'm like, what? What is he talking about? Because I think he's going to have to do a lot better than that kind of, here's our sort of false enemy out there.
Well, he wasn't the only candidate that was running those anti-Islamic ads. I mean, this is unfortunately been a fairly common theme this election cycle that we've seen.
But I think he's got to do a lot better than that, because I don't think anybody believes it.
Well, it's if you're looking to lure independents or crossover Democratic voters, then yes, you're going to have to do a lot better than that, no question.
Sticking with the Republican primary, though, in another closely watched race, we saw State Representative Steve Toth defeat incumbent Congressman Dan Crenshaw. Yeah. Do you think that's considered an upset?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, whenever a four-term incumbent goes down to defeat in a primary, it has to qualify as an upset, regardless of whatever warning signs you might have seen beforehand. I will say that one of the standout features of this was that while Crenshaw is an incumbent, he is the only Texas Republican incumbent in the House who ran without President Trump's endorsement. And in that case, Trump withholding his endorsement may have played a role.
However, when we look at the Texas Agriculture Commissioner race, we saw Nate Sheets, who was endorsed by Governor Abbott, unseat three-term incumbent Sid Miller, who received President Trump's endorsement. What is this signal for Republican leadership within Texas?
Well, this has actually been kind of an interesting aspect of the entire primary contest, because we have seen these dueling endorsements between Trump and Abbott, and with mixed results. I mean, we also saw Trump had endorsed Don Huffines for controller, and he wound and Governor Abbott had endorsed acting controller and former state senator Kelly Hancock, and in that case, Don Huffines won. So there isn't a neat explanation for whose endorsement carries more weight.
You know, we have an email that came in that said that I'm always a voting day guy. It says, Ernie has always been a voting day guy and can't wait for the partying, and has always done very little to promote the importance of early voting.
That is completely untrue.
I would have to argue against that.
Yeah,
I think
I'll support you on that.
Thank you. I kind of insist. Get out there, vote. Early voting, I love. And if you haven't voted early, vote on voting day. And you know what? May 26th, you're going to get a chance to vote again, or the early vote before that. A couple other races. What stood out to you? What was your biggest surprise this morning when you saw the numbers coming in?
Well, one of the first things that I saw once I arrived at the station was a text message from Jackie Bally, who we were on the panel with last night, to the effect that Marty Langton had not made the Republican runoff for a Harris County judge. Now, we had been talking about him all along, and for a long time as the favorite to finish first in a Republican field, and he missed out on second place by a matter of, I think, a few hundred votes.
386 votes, it looks like.
386 votes. So that race is going to a runoff between former Harris County Treasurer Orlando Sanchez and insurance businessman and Air Force veteran Warren Howell.
Fascinating.
And the Democratic side wasn't decided either. I mean, that's going to be a runoff between former Houston Mayor Elise Parker and former Houston City Council member Letitia Plummer. So, both races where people will have an opportunity to vote again in 2.5 months.
All right, we have a call on the line. Victoria from Katy is there. Victoria, what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, I was just, looking at Jasmine Crockett's tweet, how she conceded to Tallarico, and I just thought it was so wholesome to see, support throughout the party, because we've become so used to seeing politicians tear each other down. So it was just refreshing and positive to see that there's still some positivity out there.
Yep. Fair
Absolutely.
enough.
Which, interesting, when Jasmine Crockett did read her speech, she brought up immediately that they were going to close, they were not getting extended hours. Do you think that had any effect on the final voting numbers?
It's not clear to me because I haven't seen the voting totals that came in. I did note that it was that the delays were not just in Dallas County, which was her background, her backyard, but also in Williamson County, which was Tallarico's backyard.
Yeah.
So you had both Tallarico and Crockett coming out at various points and saying this is deliberate voter suppression.
Right. Jasmine Crockett did post this morning. This morning I called James and congratulated him on becoming the Senate nominee. Texas is primed to turn blue, and we must remain united because this is bigger than any one person.
Thank you, Andrew Schneider, who is Houston Public Media's government politics reporter, for joining us today on Hello Houston.
My pleasure.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll also talk with Texas Monthly writer Michael Hardy about his in-depth article on Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
ICE now has nearly...
Meet Tio Choco. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. This is his story. Visit ridemetro.org/Choco to find out where is Choco.
License plate. I'm Juana Summers. How immigration officers are using these tools on All Things Considered from NPR News.
That begins at 3 this afternoon on News 88.7. An investigation reveals that the Justice Department withheld or removed some of the Epstein files related to allegations against President Trump of sexually abusing a minor. As many high-profile figures testify about their ties to Epstein, could the president be next? That's next time on 1A.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Metro, introducing the Ride Metro Fare Card. The Ride Metro fare system replaces the Metro Q Fare Card for bus and rail fares. Details at ridemetro.org/fare system. Support for Houston Public Media comes from Good Reason Houston, bringing together educators, families, and community leaders to strengthen public education in Houston. Learn more at goodreasonhouston.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Once hailed as a young progressive star who stunned the Texas establishment, Lina Hidalgo's tenure as Harris County judge has been marked by bold reforms, public feuds, legal battles, and deeply personal struggles. In his latest article, senior writer at Texas Monthly Michael Hardy traces Hidalgo's journey from political newcomer to one of the most high-profile local officials in the country and examines how clashes with fellow Democrats, fights with state Republicans, and her own leadership style reshaped her time in office. Michael, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So it's interesting. We were actually discussing this before we started the show, and you framed this as a rise and fall. What, in your view, marks the turning point during Lina Hidalgo's time and her political trajectory?
The turning point, I think, is where I start the story, which is this incident at her 2023 swearing-in ceremony. This is just a few months after Lina Hidalgo won a second four-year term as the chief executive of Harris County. We call it county judge, but it's really just the chief executive. Mm-hmm. And she seemed to be on top of the world. In fact, her party, the Democrats, had gained a seat on the commissioner's court, so she would now preside over a 4-1 supermajority. You know, to most outside observers, she had, won. But on the day of this investiture ceremony, which is what it's called, it was a swearing-in ceremony for dozens of newly elected officials in Harris County. She was sitting in her security car, her Chevy Tahoe, parked outside the NRG Center, fuming because she thought she was being cut out of the program. She had come to believe that there was a conspiracy to prevent her from speaking at the swearing-in ceremony. Now, I've done a lot of reporting on this. I've spoken to many people. I have found no evidence of a conspiracy theory, but she was convinced there was.
So it made her look a little crazy.
Your word, not mine.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, you talk about the decline, and I'm curious from your perspective, just from starting there, was it more about, you're starting it from almost her own decisions, but was there, or her own thoughts, but was there also policy decisions, political style, or just in general shifting public opinion based on what she was thinking, like sitting in her car feeling almost like they had left her out of this?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of personality and policy. You can't separate those two out when it comes to County Judge Hidalgo. Policy is very personal for her, and her whole life is tied up with her policy goals. I mean, she's a wonk. She's a proud wonk. She, studied political science at Stanford. She went to Harvard Kennedy School. Was going to go to NYU School of Law. So she's very wrapped up in her policies. Unfortunately, some of her personal struggles, including her acknowledged struggles with mental health and the difficulty she's had getting along with her colleagues, has, impeded her policies.
Once she felt under attack, could she find a path through that? Or once she felt under attack, did that then shadow everything she did moving forward?
So, I think, to understand what happened with her, you have to go back to the very beginning. Very few people expected that she would win election in 2018. She was running against incumbent Judge Ed Emmett, who was a very popular moderate Republican. He had bipartisan support. But this was a really bad year for Republicans. This was the first midterms of Donald Trump's first presidential term in office. And Democrats just swept across the board in Harris County. They won every single county-wide race. And Lina Hidalgo, who was 27 years old, had never held a full-time job really before this. She was a graduate student, suddenly finds herself in charge of the third most populous county in America. She's 27 years old. And, she was very ambitious. She was very idealistic. But I don't think she was fully prepared for how much vitriol was going to come her way. And a lot of it was extremely racist and extremely misogynistic. And it really, I think, knocked her on her back.
And to that point, though, I'm also curious because oftentimes she was very open about her mental health. There were times where people called her a little girl, or she looks frail, or
Dora the Explorer.
Dora the Explorer. There were a lot of misogynistic. There were a lot of racist comments behind it. But I am still curious of how much of Hidalgo's political trouble stemmed from her governing style, political opinion, and also just structural limits of the county judge's office.
I think that's a really important point. I think Hidalgo never fully understood the limitations of the role of county judge.
Right.
She came in with this idea that she was essentially going to be the president of Harris County or the mayor of Harris County. And that's just not what the Harris County judge is. The Harris County judge presides over the 5-member commissioners court. And, the conventional, wisdom is like basically in order to be county judge, you have to be able to count to 3. You need 3 votes to do anything. Other than emergency management, and we can talk about how she dealt with that, there's not much that the county judge can do unilaterally. You need to be able to enlist allies. You need to build coalitions. And that's something that she was fairly successful at during her first term when it was a 3-2 Democratic majority on the court. But paradoxically, as soon as Democrats got a 4th vote on the court, she became sort of sidelined because there were, you could get Garcia and Briones and Ramsey to form this sort of moderate voting majority. And that sidelined her and Commissioner Rodney Ellis, who were the progressives on the council.
Well, you mentioned emergencies. I think she took a hit over the COVID response. Not just the early masking until forever, closures of businesses. And I loved your article. You didn't go to the pop-up hospital in NRG Park, which was at first a $60 million cost. I think it came down to 17. FEMA covered it. But in everyone's mind, it was a complete waste of money. Why did you not mention that?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I think a lot of people did think it was a waste of money, but there are also other people I talked to, including public health experts, who said it was better to be safe than sorry. Yeah. And if better to have too much capacity than too little capacity.
But what's the public perception of it?
Well, the public perception of it was mixed. I mean, let's remember that Lina Hidalgo did win re-election after taking the county through COVID-19. But among Republicans who already really disliked her, this certainly dropped her popularity even further. But I spoke to many people, including staffers who do not have the best relationship with her, and former supporters who don't have the best relationship with her, who actually thought that COVID-19 was her finest moment. So I think that it's too simplistic to simply say that she botched it. And I do quote statistics in the story that say that Harris County had a significantly lower death rate from COVID than the state as a whole.
Right. And, Michael, you talk about growing friction within the fellow Democrats, and you were saying that she felt sidelined. Do you believe that this was ideologically sidelined? She felt this from an ideological standpoint, a personal standpoint, or was this strategic?
Well, I think my analysis is that
Yeah.
she essentially sidelined herself.
Right.
When she began feuding with Commissioner Adrian Garcia and Commissioner Leslie Briones, which she did almost immediately. In fact, those are the two people that she blamed for this conspiracy, again, baseless conspiracy as far as I can tell, that there was, to keep her from speaking at the swearing-in ceremony. Once she decided to blame them for that, it made it almost impossible for her to work with them.
Right.
And if you can't work with two of your three Democratic colleagues, you are not going to get much passed.
And so that goes back to that question I asked you earlier. Once her idea of she was under attack, could she ever dig herself out of that? As long as that was still a belief she had, she must have viewed everything through those lenses.
That's right. And whether she was attacked behind the scenes or not, we can debate that. What we do know is that in public, she was on the attack. She attacked Garcia, Briones, over and over again. And this became, very obvious. It spilled out into public view. It happened at city council meetings. I think you guys have all covered that. You've seen what happened. So she chose, for whatever reason, to go very public and very negative on her two colleagues. And it had the predictable effect of alienating them and making it impossible for her to pass some of her policy priorities.
And she was so hyper-focused on this children and low-income children's status.
Expanding child care funding.
It was almost, as we talk about, the hill you're going to die on, it was almost her Waterloo that she just couldn't not do it. Do you think that really became sort of the penultimate problem?
So what you're talking about is this, ambitious program to expand early childhood education in Harris County, which is something that she's been talking about since she first took office, after she won in 2018. She finally got an opportunity to do it during COVID when Joe Biden passed the American Rescue Plan Act, which gave Harris County more than $900 million of money. And the county commissioners voted along party lines to use some of that money, something like $300 million of that to fund an early childhood education pilot program. So that was, Lina Hidalgo was able to work with her Democratic colleagues to do that. The problem is when that money ran out, there was no way to fund that program. And what Lina Hidalgo came up with her staff was, we are going to ask voters to approve a ballot proposition to raise property taxes by $10 per $100,000 of value. This would have cost the average Houstonian, about $30 a year. And her Democratic colleagues, or Adrian Garcia and Leslie Briones, did not go along with that. She got Rodney Ellis. She couldn't count to three on this. And the way that she tried to get to three was by browbeating and haranguing her colleagues, including at a very infamous session where she brought a bunch of these early childhood education program kids to a commissioner's court meeting and asked them to sort of harass the judges.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
You mentioned her staff, and a big story that came out was the whole idea of her taking her staff with her to go over to France and all of this. Did the media mischaracterize what was actually happening there? Because when we spoke with her, she was like, security travels with us. We have this. Or was there actually something larger than should have been in her contingent and her group of folks that would travel with her?
I think the real dispute there was over whether Harris County would pay for her security to go with her to Paris, and probably her staff as well. I mean, I think what I would say about that is if she had better relationships with her colleagues, that's something that probably she could have gotten them to go along with. The fact of the matter is, I mean, things like as bad as things might look from reading my story, things were actually much worse behind the scenes. I can tell you that there was just a total breakdown in the relationship between Hidalgo and her fellow commissioners, except for Rodney Ellis, who has remained her strongest supporter. So if she had better relationships, I think they probably would have approved that. But they just were in no mood to do her any favors.
So would that be your advice to her if she asked you, what can I do to get back on track? Would it be improve your people skills? What would you tell her?
Well, she's announced that she's not running for a third term.
Right.
So she will be leaving office.
For now.
She has not announced what she's going to do next. I don't really see it as my role as a journalist to give advice to public officials. But, I would say that some of the problems that she's encountered, were, kind of predictable given her style of engagement. I mean, I think it's interesting to go back to emergency management for a little bit. This is the one area of the Harris County judge's job description that you can do sort of unilaterally. And I think there's an argument to be made that she did relatively well with emergency management compared to some of these things that required coalition building or compromise. With COVID-19, she did reach out to experts. She did, you may dislike her decisions, but she made them and she was able to defend them. She was not able to accomplish what she wanted to accomplish when it came to working in the Commissioner's Court.
But even coming to the election, when we're looking at the Harris County judge election, she came out throwing punches at Anise Parker based on the relationship between Kim Ogg, former Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg, and former Mayor Anise Parker, because Kim Ogg investigated Lina Hidalgo's staffers, which all the cases were eventually dismissed. What do you think that sends? What type of message do you think Lina Hidalgo was trying to send to voters when she said, this is Kim Ogg 2.0?
Yeah, that was really an extraordinary statement to make. Lina Hidalgo she can be vindictive. She remembers who has opposed her in the past, and she does not forget. She has a long memory. She said that, at the swearing-in ceremony, she talked about Democrats who didn't support her in her reelection campaign, that she was going to get revenge on them, essentially. And Kim Ogg was her biggest nemesis throughout her first term and second term. And then she outlasted Kim Ogg. Kim Ogg got primaried out. So I think Lina Hidalgo wants to assert her influence even after leaving office. And the way to do that is to prevent someone that she thinks of as a, kind of a Democrat in name only, like Anise Parker. That's how she sees it, from taking over. She doesn't want Anise Parker to be her successor.
Right. And I think the other, thing that I think about when I think of Lina Hidalgo is how from the beginning, she said she would only run 2 terms. She was pretty clear on that. Or do you think, at least from my conversation with her, she said that was always her plan moving forward. But to you then, from your perspective and from your coverage of her, do you think there was a turning point where she decided, I'm absolutely not going to run for re-election? And why do you think that was?
I don't know for sure why she didn't run for re-election. I found 1 or 2 interviews in which she has alluded to not wanting to serve more than 2 terms, but that is the kind of thing that a lot of politicians say.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of examples of politicians saying, I'm only going to run for a certain number of terms, and then they run anyway. Yeah. I think if Lina Hidalgo thought she could win and that she wanted to run for a 3rd term, she would have done it. My interpretation of this, of her bringing out this, I'm fulfilling a campaign promise, is that it's a way for her to save face.
Do you think how much do you think of public approval ratings played into her factor of deciding not to run?
There's a poll that I cite in the story that's from June of last year from the University of Houston Hobby Center that showed her with something like a 65% approval rating among Democrats. So she seems to remain popular in the Democratic Party. Now, it should be noted that was, almost a year ago. It would have been a tough re-election, I think. She won both of her races by less than 3 points.
Right.
And this is in a county that is increasingly and overwhelmingly Democratic, as you all know.
Michael, what do you think her story tells us about the challenges facing young, kind of high-profile newcomers that don't necessarily fit the profile of what necessarily people think of Texas elected officials?
I think she had a very tough, challenge when she won re-election. This is a 27-year-old graduate student who's suddenly being put in charge of the 3rd largest county in America. And even the best politician with impeccable mental health would have struggled with this. Unfortunately, she had some real challenges with mental health that she's been very brave and honest about. And, I think we should all admire her for her honesty about that. But it really put her in a difficult position.
Michael Hardy is a senior writer at Texas Monthly. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Yeah,
thanks.
Great article.
Coming up, The Great Gatsby. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
on the next Fresh Air.
Meet Damola, songwriter, world-class violinist, and award-winning multi-genre artist. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. Visit ridemetro.org/Damola to learn more about his ride.
About backup singers. Join us.
You can hear that tonight at 8 on News 88.7.
You got your TV medical dramas, and then you've got the TV medical drama.
That's your experience when you're in the ER. You don't know what that doctor had for breakfast. You just show up and you hope to God he's going to save you, you know? And I think it made it much more realistic.
I'm Kaya Rizdal. We go to the pit next time on Marketplace.
You can hear Marketplace at 6:30 here on News 88.7.
If you were in a cult, would you know it?
One of the problems that we have in our society is even our best or healthiest groups and systems are still harmful to individuals.
How to recognize the language of cults and why every organization might just fall within a spectrum of cultiness. That's next time on Think.
Tonight at 11 on News 88.7. Support comes from the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, offering comprehensive cancer care that is compassionate, personalized, and driven by clinical research. More at stlukeshealth.org/cancer. Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from CertaPro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management. Estimates and more at CertaPro.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
All right, The Great Gatsby's in town. You saw it last night, Celeste?
It was fabulous, Frank.
It was terrific. We saw it last night. It's just the story of really a poor boy can't marry a rich girl.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing. That's really what it was all about. It was very biographical of Scott Fitzgerald. He wanted to marry a Chicago debutante, and her father said, "You don't have any money, kid, so forget it."
Tough luck.
So then he wrote this novel about this long-lost love and how if you do become that millionaire, no matter what it takes, you can get her back.
Daisy.
It didn't quite work out that way. But it is a fabulous...
No spoilers.
Well, it's a fabulous book we all read in high school, I hope. And it's become a play and a musical, lots of different adaptations, and it is in town as a Tony Award-winning version that opened on Broadway in 2024. It's at Hobby Center through Sunday. And with us now is Edward Staudenmayer, who plays Meyer Wolfsheim in the musical. Edward, welcome to Hello Houston. Great job last night.
Hey, thanks a lot. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So it really zings and dings. I mean, it really is quite the fast. The set is amazing how it goes from one staging to another. I've never seen cars actually drive on stage, and they do. I mean, if you ever in your career, this must be, you got to watch out not to get run over, which somebody did.
Somebody says, "Hey, another spoiler."
I know, right?
Yeah. It's amazing, the technology and the design. All the designers do such wonderful work and getting to tell a story and so quickly. It's almost episodic, like a movie. And we are definitely bringing the party. The party is roaring on over at the Great Gatsby. So please come down and see us until Sunday the 8th.
Well, it's as Frank was saying, it's a classic story. So many people know it. Bringing it to the stage, do you feel a certain commitment to a story that so many hold so dear? And how free are you to let them experience something new and unique?
I'm thrilled to bring this across country. I think that we have such a wonderful group of actors telling the story. I really love our narrator, Nick, and he really makes you connect to this material. And now tomorrow morning, we are going to have a student matinee at 11 a.m. with all these high school kids, and we're going to find out who really read the book.
Not just the cliff notes, right?
When you get those certain gasps from the audience, you're like, you didn't read.
the teacher goes, "Oh, you didn't know that happened, huh?"
Yeah.
So you've been playing this role for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I just spent 4 months in Seoul, Korea doing this, and the Koreans absolutely loved it. It was the greatest experience of my life, getting to live there and present this to them. Our producer, Mr. Shin, is a famous Korean producer, and he had a big hit in New York with this, and he wanted to bring it back to Korea for his people.
At the time that this show was coming up, if I'm not mistaken, there was a different version of Great Gatsby, I think just called Gatsby, that was also making its way forward. But this one made it to the Tonys.
Well, what's interesting is the book became in public domain, so I think there was a big race for a few Gatsbys to happen. And like I said, Mr. Shin, he contacted our composer, Jason Howland, who's fantastic, who I worked here in Houston, 20 years ago doing Wonderland when it tried out at the Alley Theater.
Yeah.
He is our composer. He was our conductor and a music arranger and producer, and he was spoken to by our producer and said, let's write a Great Gatsby. He's like, well, can we get the rights? He goes, by the time you write that musical, the rights will be available to everybody.
Wow. Well, that's cool. That's an awesome experience there. I'm also wondering about the idea of taking something like we already mentioned, it's a known novel, and you bring the characters to life through song, which gives you a chance to share inner monologue and feeling and emotion. And that's what I really think is when musical hits its stride, what it can do so well.
Absolutely, for sure. A lot is seen in the female characters in our show. Kate Kerrigan, our writer, has done such a lovely job. But you get the book. It's always coming from the perspective of Nick as the narrator. It's all through his eyes. But there's times where he's not on stage, and you get to see like Daisy's inner feelings. You know, a lot of these characters aren't such great people, but you kind of have an insight of like how she can't leave her husband. She would lose her daughter, like her inner struggles that make her the way she is.
But I have to say, when Jake David Smith, who plays Jay Gatsby, comes out and sings his big ballad, All for Her, you just feel this incredible love. I mean, the way his voice, the song, the music, I really felt the connection between the characters, even though he hadn't seen her yet.
That's great. I mean, isn't that guy terrific? Like, he opens his mouth
Phenomenal.
And it's just the voice.
Beautiful.
It's so gorgeous. And it's such this yearning long and this love. I mean, he's seen her in his mind because they had fallen in love 5 years earlier. But and that's what the show's all about, that longing, that's wanting the green light, that hope. And like you were saying before, it's the tragedy of the poor boy wants to marry the rich girl. And the sad thing about this, that makes this destroying the American dream, is that even though he amasses all this money, he's still not good enough. He doesn't have the class to be married to a debutante like Daisy Buchanan.
Yeah, and don't forget, the girl wanted to marry him too. It was Dad that stepped in and said no. So it really is kind of a sad, tragic, and it went to Fitzgerald to his death. You know, he died thinking he was a failure, even though he did marry Zelda, who went crazy. But anyway, it's a great show. And it's on until Sunday. Welcome to Houston. I hope you're having fun while you're here.
I am. I'm staying with this family that I love so much. They put me up when I'm here, and we're about to go play tennis. So I'm loving this weather. I'm so happy that I'm not covered in snow anymore. So thank you, Houston. Thank you, Texas. I'm so glad to be here.
And thank you. Actor Edward Staudenmayer is playing Meyer Wolfsheim in the Broadway musical adaptation of The Great Gatsby. Again, Edward, welcome to Houston. Thanks for joining us today, and phenomenal show.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And The Great Gatsby is running at the Hobby Center through Sunday, March 8th. For more information, visit thehobbycenter.org. Coming up, we're going to continue discussing today's top headlines. We're also going to learn about the redM movement and how they're raising awareness on human trafficking. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
ICE now has nearly $80 billion at its disposal. Some of that money is being used to create a broad set of surveillance tools to monitor and intimidate both immigrants and U.S. citizens.
They would just come and stand right in front of my car and take pictures of me and take pictures of our license plate.
I'm Juana Summers, how immigration officers are using these tools on All Things Considered from NPR News.
That begins at 3 this afternoon on News 88.7. Support comes from Blake Hillegeist Real Estate, independent commercial and residential real estate broker with over 30 years experience guiding clients through economic downturns, realty challenges, and everyday life situations. More at BlakeSellsHouston.com. 79 degrees at the University of Houston, and this is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's now 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, U.S. Representatives Al Green and Christian Menifee are headed to a runoff in May. We'll be joined by Houston Public Media reporter Michael Adkison, who will discuss his coverage for Texas' 18th Congressional District. I'm Frank Billingsley.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. We'll also discuss the impacts major sporting events can have for human trafficking with David Reid, founder of the redM movement.
And I'm Ernie Manous. Plus, we'll also learn about a community effort to restore one of the oldest AIDS memorials in the nation, the Texas AIDS Memorial Garden.
Also, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870. Or you can email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org.
Hello Houston continues right after the news from NPR and News 88.7.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The Senate is expected to vote this afternoon on a resolution to pull back military action in Iran. NPR's Sam Greenglass reports President Trump ordered sustained strikes without authorization from Congress.
The War Powers resolution is not expected to pass, but its sponsor, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine, says the measure can be brought for a vote again.
This thing evolves, and the virtue of a War Powers resolution, it's not a one and done.
The vote comes after top Trump administration officials briefed all lawmakers on Tuesday. Republican Senator Josh Hawley initially backed a failed resolution to curb intervention in Venezuela, but said he is not likely to vote to limit the action in Iran at this time.
They reiterated that there are no troops on the ground and there haven't been at any point, so that's significant, which is a difference from what happened in Venezuela.
A similar resolution is slated for a House vote on Thursday. Sam Greenglass, NPR News, Washington.
Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is back on Capitol Hill today, this time testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. In a heated exchange, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin repeatedly pressed Noem about her description of 2 U.S. citizens who were shot and killed by federal immigration agents in Minnesota.
You didn't wait for the investigation, did you? You didn't wait for the evidence. You proclaimed that they were domestic terrorists at the time. Why did you do that?
And you didn't wait to attack our law enforcement.
Why did you do that?
We're going into a dangerous situation.
Why did you call them domestic terrorists?
Because our ICE officers and our HSI officers that day risked their lives to protect that scene. So evidence could be reclaimed. So it could be used in the investigation. Because those violent rioters that were
So you're
there
proud of the fact that you called them domestic terrorists? Is that what you're telling America?
When asked directly to apologize, Noem refused to walk back her remarks, saying the investigation into the shooting is still ongoing. Her appearance comes a day after a bruising Senate hearing where members of her own party questioned her leadership. The price of crude oil appears to be leveling off after a big jump earlier this week. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the economic fallout from the U.S. war with Iran.
Crude oil prices have jumped more than 10% since the U.S. and Israel launched their attack on Iran over the weekend. Most of that jump came Monday and Tuesday. Prices appear to be stabilizing, with Brent crude now trading above $80 a barrel. President Trump is hoping to restart tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz just south of Iran by offering Navy escorts through that critical choke point. U.S. gasoline prices continue to climb. They're up about 20 cents a gallon on average over the last couple of days. AAA says the price of diesel fuel now tops $4 a gallon. If that's sustained, it could raise the cost of everything that travels by truck or train. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Stocks are trading higher on Wall Street at this hour. The Dow was up 326 points. The Nasdaq Composite also trading higher, up 329. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. Both Republican and Democratic candidates will be heading to a runoff in the Harris County judges race. News 88.7's Sarah Grunow says the Harris County Clerk's office finished tallying ballots from all 275 precincts by Wednesday morning.
None of the 3 Democrats or 6 Republicans were able to claim victory in the race for the county judge's seat. On the Democratic side, former Houston Mayor Annise Parker led the polls but was unable to receive 50% of the vote. She will go to a runoff with former Houston City Council member Letitia Plummer. At her crowded campaign watch party on Tuesday night, Parker said that wasn't the plan.
And I'm a little tense because I want it over tonight. I have every confidence I will be the next Harris County judge. I know I will be the Democratic nominee. I would like it to be tonight so I can pivot and start focusing on November.
The Republican ticket for county judge will also go to a runoff. That's after former Harris County Treasurer Orlando Sanchez and Air Force veteran Warren Howell succeeded as the top performers in the race. The runoff election will be held on May 26. I'm Sarah Gruno, News 88.7.
The Republican primary in Texas's newly redrawn 9th congressional district is headed to a runoff. Alex Mueller and Texas House Representative Briscoe Cain emerged as frontrunners in the crowded primary, but neither earned more than 50% of the vote. The two will now face off again at the end of May. Mueller currently has 36% of the vote, Cain with 31%, according to the Texas Secretary of State's office. On the other side, Leticia Gutierrez is the Democratic primary nominee after securing 53% of the vote. The race for Galveston County judge in the November election will come down to longtime incumbent and longtime Republican incumbent Mark Henry and Democratic challenger Albert Smith. Henry says he's confident voters will help him return as county judge.
Of course, we'll take every election seriously, no matter who it is or what it is. We are not overly confident, but we just got to do our job, tell the voters what we've done, and hope that they agree with us and that that's what they wanted us to do.
Henry has been in office for 15 years. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at progressivecommercial.com.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Hello Houston with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
We're back. Hello, Houston.
Hello, Frank. Hello, Ernie. We are back for the second hour of Hello, Houston.
Yeah, a nice mild day out there.
Yeah, but it's cloudy.
It is a little cloudy. There's a front that's lingering off in the central part of the state that's not going to make it in here. But because it's close enough, the wind flow off the Gulf gives us enough moisture to give us a cloudy day.
Well, I tell you what, I don't mind it because I know summer is just right around the corner. So
knocking
if we
on
can
the
keep
door.
that cloud coverage and the temps a little bit cooler, I'm here for it, Frank.
Yeah, and here we are officially in spring.
Yeah.
Well, I say officially, meteorologically speaking. March, April, May is spring.
Yeah. We're trotting into it, though. I think it's been a little warm, a little early for me.
A little warm, a little early. Yeah. Usually April's our best month. October and April are the primo months. We'll see, right?
Yeah.
And which ones are our toughest months? August, would you say, for heat?
For heat, August, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then January for cold, usually, although February is a close second.
We've had quite a few winter storms during February.
Yeah, we have, especially the nation. I mean, like our last guest was saying, he's here and there's no snow. He's so thankful.
To go play tennis.
I mean, in Washington, D.C., one of my friends there said they've had snow for a solid 30 days.
Right.
And he's a weatherman up there, so he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. So we can trust him.
Yep. Fritz, our technician guy who has been here, helped build this studio and all that, is visiting us today, and he comes from Chicago.
Yeah.
And he was saying the same thing last night. So nice to be here.
Yes.
In a short sleeve shirt, right?
Yeah. So enjoy it when you got it. And we're lucky. Something else that's coming, FIFA is coming sooner than you think.
Yeah. And, it's unfortunate, right? We love to see these big major events come to our city and celebrate sportsmanship and football and international, relationships. However, it also brings, unfortunately, higher numbers in human trafficking. Yep. And so we're going to be highlighting that with the founder of the redM movement.
And we're also going to take a look at the Texas AIDS Memorial Garden, one of the oldest AIDS tributes, memorials,
I'm interested to hear more about that because it's a small garden, and a lot of people don't even know it exists. So
there's one here in Houston.
There is the
right
one.
here.
Yeah, this is the one.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to get a little of the history of that and where it goes now. What they're looking to do and preserve the memory. But speaking of things being preserved, we have to preserve the totals of the elections. That's the best segue I can come up with right now. Celeste, take us into headlines.
If you're just joining us, it was a dramatic primary night across Texas, and several big races are far from over. So what do these results tell us about where Republican and Democratic voters are right now? Are we in an anti-incumbent mood, or is something bigger happening? Joining us now to discuss is HPM reporter Michael Adkison. And if you have comments or questions on last night's results, you can give us a call, 713-440-8870.
Michael, what surprised you most about last night?
Oh, what surprised me most? That's a good question. I think that there were a couple of big names that are not moving forward, shall we say. Dan Crenshaw being one of them. That's a big one. I mean, you just think about where Dan Crenshaw was, 10 years ago, or several years ago. And the role that he played in the Republican Party to now is kind of remarkable. I'll tell you the truth. I'm a little bit surprised by the Jasmine Crockett-James Tallarico race and the result that James Tallarico is
seemed like a flip of the coin when we were going into it.
It really did. And I think that it's really telling how people talked about this race last fall and Tallarico's prospects in the race to now here we are, and Jasmine Crockett is not the victor that people thought she was going to be, essentially.
And I think when we look at that race specifically, a lot of conversation that I'm hearing is it really came down to the Valley, South Texas, that Latino vote, that James Tallarico was able to make traction in South Texas more than essentially Crockett was able to do that. And so it's very interesting to see.
She kind of won the big cities, didn't she? She won Houston.
She won Houston, yeah.
And Dallas.
It's interesting because polling on it went back and forth. And so 2 weeks ago, she was way up. Then a week ago, he was way up.
It was like 9 points.
Right. And you're like, what's going on here? The sway back and forth. And of course, it illustrates just how significant media culture is in our elections. And it sounds dumb, and we've known this since the Nixon era. But a thing like The Late Show shifted his tides. The blogger experience that happened supposedly with something Tallarico had said shifted the tides the other way, and that these media impacts, when they fell, really had an impact. Had they been flipped, this race might have been flipped.
Right, and I think we can do a lot of, Monday morning as an analysis, essentially, on what happened here. But at the risk of speaking too much about this race on the grander picture of nationwide races, I think it really is telling of what kind of candidate Democrats are appealing to at this moment, where, they just got butchered in 2024. And who won this race when you had a candidate that was let's work together, let's find harmony, and a candidate who was brash and unafraid to speak her mind. And Democrats, it was very close, obviously, but Democrats ultimately went with the one who said, let's work on bipartisanship, let's work together and figure out a way to move forward. I think that's, what a lot of Democrats are going to be looking for come November.
Well, sorry.
But, Michael, here in Houston, voters in the 18th Congressional District may be bracing for yet another trip to the polls.
Another one.
Congressman Al Green and Christian Menifee appear to be headed toward a Democratic runoff in May, which would mean, again, a fourth election in about 7 months for that district alone. Talk to us about that. That was some of the coverage that you were specifically doing.
Right, and I'm actually working on something following up on that, again, 4 elections in 7 months, coming off of 2 years of just, tumultuous patterns in that district. You've got Sheila Jackson Lee running for that district after losing her mayoral election and then dying suddenly, and then Sylvester Turner then being the nominee, and then he died suddenly and unexpectedly. And then it was 11 months without representation, and then it was a special election, a runoff, a primary, and a runoff. and then there will have to be a November election for this district, all happening in the span of about 2.5 to 3 years. It's just I spoke with voters yesterday, and they're like, we are tired of having to go to the polls.
The district shifted in the middle of it all too.
Exactly, there was redistricting.
So that threw everything off. I'm curious your thoughts on Amanda Edwards, because even though she stepped out of the race, she couldn't step out, I don't believe, any sooner, because she didn't know how her race was going to go when she was running. But that was almost 8% of the vote went to her, and she is not even in the race. But her name was on the ballot, and people still voted for her. Had she not been there, we very well may have seen a different outcome.
Right, and you caught me at the wrong moment. I had earlier looked up the sheer number of votes, not the percentage, but
7,318.
Well, so it's 7,000, right?
Right.
That's just about how many people voted almost entirely in those previous elections. That because this was a primary, that there was just such higher turnout than in the special elections.
Yeah.
So it really is kind of remarkable to think about it in that sense, that that was thousands. This primary had way more voters than the special elections previously, and so those 7,000 who voted for Amanda Edwards, probably not all 7,000 are going to go back to the runoff election, but exactly how many of them do and who they go to, I think, could play a major role in this.
Just for point of reference, Menifee got 43,595 and Al Green got 41,818 to Edwards and 7,318.
All right. If you'd like to join the conversation, 713-440-8870. We have Colby on the line from Katy. Colby, welcome to Hello Houston.
Howdy, y'all.
Hi.
Hi. I have a comment. I think one of the big shakeups in the demo sphere, I'm a Democrat, was the last item on the ballot, or last position on the ballot, was our county party chair. Tracy Gibson has ousted Mike Doyle.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That come as a surprise to you, Colby?
A little bit. I think, Mike Doyle has some very loyal supporters, and Tracy Gibson is relatively new to Harris County politics. But, I guess a little shakeup was needed, and I look forward to seeing what she can bring to the table.
Yeah. Colby, thank you very much for those comments, and we'll continue to watch these races as we move forward. Another race that surprised me, I don't know if you've been following this one or not, but the lieutenant governor race that Goodwin just missed by 2% getting out of having to have a runoff, but there's going to be a runoff there too. Surprised?
Yes and no. That's a good question. Obviously, this race come November is going to be Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's to lose, essentially. Democrats certainly have an uphill battle here. I think it's a race I hate to say that the Senate race, understandably, has gotten a lot of the attention, but that the governor's race, the lieutenant governor's race, really have not gotten as much attention as you would expect or anticipate any other year, election cycles. I mean, think about 2022 when it was Beto O'Rourke running ultimately against Greg Abbott. That got so much attention because that was basically the biggest race in Texas that year for the most part. Those two races, lieutenant governor and governor, I don't think have gotten as much attention. So we'll see. The Democratic primary, I think it will be interesting to see where that goes from here and what the narrative goes like. But, Vicki Goodwin, as well as the Democratic nominee for Governor Gina Hinojosa and now the Senate Democratic nominee, James Tallarico, all colleagues in the Texas State House of Representatives. So, how they differ from one another will be really interesting.
I wonder if there's some strategy there from the Democrats saying, you know what, let's just try to flip one seat at a time. Let's go with the James Tallarico or Jasmine Crockett, two strong candidates. Let's try to get them in there and get that seat won, and then we'll worry about governor or lieutenant governor.
Well, there's already talk of Crockett for Ted Cruz's seat to put her up to go against him.
Is there a one election at a time to try to take over as opposed to let's just go full blast blue everywhere we look?
And that's a good question. And obviously the U.S. Senate seat, I think most everyone would agree, is probably the biggest seat that's up for grabs in this election cycle. And, I feel like every November when there's an election, we're talking about Texas is going to turn blue this year. And who's to say if that actually is going to hold true? But I do see your point that this is obviously the most major race. And that's where a lot of Democrats are going to shift their attention. And I think come November again, nationwide, you are going to see so much money poured into this race, specifically from Democrats and James Tallarico.
But I do think that Gina Hinojosa is somebody to watch. She is a Latina from South Texas. She's from Brownsville. I have been watching her rise, I would say, to this position. Her candidacy. She is well liked in Austin. I also think that it's going to be a tough road to beat Governor Abbott, and if she does not, he will be the longest sitting governor, I believe, that we've had in Texas history.
Yes.
And if she did beat him, then she would be breaking that 30-year plus track. Do you think that this is a telling time? I keep asking, are we in a moment?
I think I go back and forth. I think that I saw someone shared this on social media last night, and I think they really hit it on the nose of what it would take for a Democrat to actually flip a seat in Texas. It has to be a great Democratic candidate. It has to be, as Democrats would see it, a poor Republican candidate. And there's also just got to be that momentum on the national level. And so I think that's why they've got their eyes on this November, particularly if Ken Paxton is the victor in the Republican runoff for the state or for the U.S. Senate seat. That will really put Democrats in what they would see as the best position.
I think, though, that the fact we always miss, we always look back to 2018, say there'll be a blue wave, but that's because you could do a straight party ticket. So if in like a case people came out for James Tallarico, was it 8 years ago, they could have just hit Democrat and then all the Democratic candidates would have ridden on this coattail. But because they changed that and took that off the ballots, now you can't do it. So you have to work through every race. And I think that is going to stall from a sweep of any time. You can say maybe more Democrats will come out, but a lot of people will vote for the couple races they came for and leave the rest of the ballot empty. So I think that's what makes the challenge harder to have a blue wave in a state like Texas.
Certainly. And I kind of had a tongue-in-cheek comment there about how we always hear about a blue wave in Texas. Yeah. But at the end of the day, there is a Democratic base here in the state that, there is a significant proportion. We're not all Republican in Texas. But that being said, voting has shown that we are more Republican than we are Democrat. And so, it is going to be an uphill battle for these candidates. I will also add, I mentioned earlier that they're all state house colleagues, Hinojosa, Tallarico, and Goodwin. They're also Central Texas representatives. Each one of them is from the Austin, Williamson County, Travis County area, which also makes this really interesting, too. They all were very close with one another.
And just to reiterate how hard it would be essentially for somebody to come in and beat Governor Abbott basically has everything that a candidate could dream of in his position. He has more than $100 million in campaign cash on hand, strong name recognition, and he has the backing of the current president. That's something we've been looking at, endorsements. And we saw Governor Abbott kind of fracture a little bit with the president when it came to endorsements. Was there anything surprising there for you?
About the result for Governor Abbott?
Yeah.
Not particularly. I used to work in Austin covering politics. I've met his biggest supporters, and Abbott is someone that his supporters truly see as just, where the party should be, essentially. He is very smart. He's very cordial. He's very qualified. Governor Abbott used to be a Supreme Court justice and then the Attorney General, and now he's the governor. That he has quite the resume, and it shows in the way that he handles his politics and his policy priorities. And so, I'm not surprised, to say the least. He is someone who's very cordial and intelligent and can voice his thoughts even if they're in disagreement with the president and still come out the victor. And obviously that has shown.
Well, there was a lot of talk about maybe his desire to be president. Is that sort of quelled?
That when I moved to Austin, when I moved back to Texas, that was the conversation. Was Governor Abbott wants to be president, and what's the path that's going to get him there? And that really has not come to fruition in the way I think a lot of people think it has. He has made very clear in the past, I'm in Texas. My focus is Texas. We'll see what's down the road, but my focus is Texas. That, 2024, when President Trump was floating Governor Abbott's name as a potential vice presidential candidate, pretty quickly Governor Abbott said, respectfully, no thank you. I would like to stay in Texas. He did not see himself at the vice presidency.
To go back to Celeste's question, though, and I'm curious if anyone has tallied that. I'm sure someone has. I don't know it yet. But as we talk about endorsements, and Abbott did split with Trump on a few endorsements, do we know, is there the tally list. Who won that?
So
Whose endorsements?
The biggest one that comes to mind is the I can't remember exactly what district it was. I believe it was 8th or 9th, but the race that was Briscoe Cain versus Alex Mueller.
Right.
That's probably the most. There's a couple notable ones. That's a very notable one in the sense that Briscoe Cain, tried and true Republican, well known in Texas, and Governor Abbott endorsed him for his work in the state House of Representatives, and Donald Trump endorsed Alex Mueller. Now, there has been quite a bit of analysis on that of did President Trump just want to endorse who was leading in the polls so he didn't look like he endorsed the wrong person? That's potentially a factor. The other major race being the agricultural commissioner, and that's kind of a dramatic one.
That was also, I think, a big dramatic one.
It definitely was.
Because I interviewed both Nate Sheets as well as former now agriculture commissioner Sid Miller. And, I would say Nate Sheets was very proud at the fact that the governor had endorsed him. And at the time, Sid Miller had not been endorsed by President Trump, but later on he was endorsed by him. And I think that says a lot in regards to Republicans looking to leadership within our state.
Certainly.
And just for point of reference, Sheets got 53% of the vote. Miller got 47% of the vote.
There you go. I think that Miller... he was someone who had very closely aligned himself with Donald Trump. That
yes.
He was someone who was very vocal about his support. I remember covering a couple of events that Donald Trump was at, both when he I guess they were both when he was a candidate for the 2024 election, and Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller was there. He was and made known that he was there. So I think it's pretty telling. I think one wonders what went on leading up to Governor Abbott's non-endorsement of Miller, what led up to that. And I think one factor may potentially have just been that Miller, at the very beginning of the conversation about a THC ban, Miller was opposed because he said this is going to hurt farmers. And, when you're looking for what led up to this, that's potentially a factor.
Yeah, and I also think it's a factor in the fact that when President Trump originally first came into office, he, as well as Governor Abbott, really cracked down on the immigration policies. And Sid Miller came out and was very public to the governor and said, hey, we have trucks sitting on the border, U.S. trucks sitting on the border with produce that's going bad. And this is costing farmers tens of millions of dollars. You've got to do something about this. So Sid Miller, from a record standpoint, looking at policy and agriculture, has been outspoken, and he will call out the governor. So it'll be very interesting to see the relationship between Nate Sheets and the governor and how that works out with representing Texas agriculture.
Certainly. I also I'm laughing to myself as we're talking about this, and I feel like sometimes when we talk about politics and what leads up to these decisions, it's almost like the same energy as like what led up to a big fight on Real Housewives. It's like you look for every little clue to be like, where did the daylight go wrong between what led up to this?
Dun, dun. I love it.
One last race we haven't really talked much about is the Attorney General in Mays Middleton versus Chip Roy, which is really going to be an interesting race to watch up close. Mays Middleton had almost 40% to Chip Roy's about 31% in the early voting, or the whatever we want to call primary vote. So it's going to be an interesting race to see who takes the lead there.
Definitely. And I will also add that, we're only having this race essentially because Ken Paxton is the candidate for Senate in the Republican primary now, the runoff. And so his sort of protege, if you will, was Aaron Wright, who was not successful in the race. So it's going to be, I think, really interesting to see if Attorney General Paxton weighs in on this race now that it is going towards this runoff between Middleton and Chip Roy. He obviously has been very critical of Chip Roy in the past for the ways that Chip Roy has broken with the president. And so it's hard to see him weighing in support of Chip Roy, but we'll see if he goes as far as to weigh in support of Mays Middleton, or if he just says, hey, I've got a primary runoff of my own to focus on, and that's where my attention's going to go.
Well, what about Wesley Hunt? Do you think he'll make an endorsement?
That's a good question. If you're Wesley Hunt, I think you've got a lot of questions before you about what's next. Do you make an endorsement in the runoff?
And if you're wrong,
what do you do?
Yeah.
What does your future look like? Wesley Hunt has got a lot of questions before him, I think, about next steps.
And he was arguing, I just want to go to Hunt for a moment. He was arguing, he saw a path forward. He wasn't a spoiler. He could have done something. Numbers are not supporting that belief.
Right. And, again, one wonders what the race would have looked like had Wesley Hunt not done that.
Yeah.
Would we be going to a runoff? Would there have been a clear victor on Tuesday night? Who's to say? But, now we'll find out come May.
Yeah.
Houston public media reporter Michael Adkison, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you all.
And you can find more election coverage at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Coming up on Hello Houston, we're going to discuss the possible human trafficking at the upcoming FIFA World Cup games right here in Houston with David Reid, the founder of redM Movement. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
An investigation revealed.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Monitor and intimidate both immigrants and U.S. citizens.
They would just come and stand right in front of my car and take pictures of me and take pictures of our license plate.
I'm Juana Summers. How immigration officers are using these tools on All Things Considered from NPR News.
All Things Considered, this afternoon beginning at 3 on News 88.7. Houston Public Media presents the Moth Story Slam March 10th at Lambert Hall. Doors open at 7 p.m. The theme of the night is Fumbles and Fouls, stories about a moment you dropped the ball. Tickets at HoustonPublicMedia.org/themoth.
Support comes from the law firm McFarland PLLC, eminent domain attorneys focused exclusively on representing landowners against the government's taking of private property for public use across the state of Texas. More at McFarlandPLLC.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Metro, introducing the Ride Metro Fare Card. The Ride Metro Fare system replaces the Metro Q Fare Card for bus and rail fares. Details at ridemetro.org/fare system.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV8, at 7, Nature and Sir David Attenborough present the conclusion of Parenthood, with amazing stories of animal parents embarking on the greatest of all challenges. Tonight at 7 on TV8.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
As Houston prepares to welcome the world for the World Cup, a local organization is working to shine a light on an issue that often rises alongside major global events: human trafficking. Today we're joined by David Reid, the founder of the redM Movement. The pro bono crowdsourcing group brings together professionals from energy, the arts, science, and media to raise awareness, support survivors, and push for change. David, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
And if you would like to join the conversation, if you have a comment or a question, you can call 713-440-8870.
So make the connection for us. I mean, big events like FIFA and Super Bowls and other big sporting events and human trafficking.
Right.
Show me the pathway.
It's not natural, right? You would think these are fun events. But what happens is human trafficking organizations who are a lot larger than we know about, I mean, they exist around us. They target markets, and one of their strong markets is isolated males with money. That's kind of a large thing. When you see large events, you see a lot of males with money, and they'll focus on that and say, okay, they're trying to bring in humans to sell them, and that's their kind of concept. So you think Super Bowl is probably our biggest, OTC is pretty high. But we know this not because there's lots of data that people are trying to analyze and understand it, but we know it through people who have been trafficked. So they talk about that process of being pulled in, and there's plenty of documentaries on that stuff.
Why do you say there isn't documentation or data?
There's assessment. So people in the space get very nervous. You know, people in the city get nervous. We get painted sometimes as a high trafficking city. What we are is an aware city. And so my analysis, the work that we've done, it appears like what makes a city susceptible to trafficking. People used to say, well, it's the movement of people, and everyone assumes that trafficking is actually human smuggling, which it's not. Trafficking is the selling of somebody, or the at least low payment or no payment getting people to do things in the labor world, and then into sex trafficking, which in the U.S. probably sex trafficking is bigger than labor trafficking. So it's really where people are.
Yeah,
that's the best way to understand it. A lot of people in this movement will say we're the biggest city or this is the biggest state, and they make those statements, but there's not like a survey going out. Are you trafficked? It's not. That's not the. So you're doing extrapolation from rescues and what you're seeing and what you're hearing. But really, my own assessment, it just appears cities, because we're all over the U.S., we're in 3 countries, but assessing what's going on. We've done some good work of at least identifying what's the volume.
And that's what I'm curious, though, because you do have a lot of people coming in for this worldwide event. They're not from here.
Right.
So they're visiting.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at the people that are being trafficked, are they people that are locally here being trafficked?
Great question.
Or are these people being brought in?
So people do get brought in. It's a business. So they just think there's a high demand, I need a supply. Most people assume this is border crossing. This is what we're talking about. And that politicizes the issue quite a lot. Our rescue numbers show around 80% U.S. born.
Wow.
So yes, there is things that relate to people from other countries, and that is a whole subject in itself. But what we're seeing a lot of is kid grooming. For us, we do education in companies often. We have like a care package build thing we do at a lunchtime. Usually in a group of 30 people, one person's kid is being groomed. So when we explain this is what grooming looks like, someone will say, hey, this sounds like my child, but I'm sure it's not trafficking. So far, 100% have been trafficking. We've had 41 cases in just doing this over the last couple of years.
This may sound like a dumb question, but I'm curious, why is this so hard to break? Why is this so hard to go at and stop?
Well, I think that this is kind of our motivation. At first, we started just helping survivor care organizations. But what we started to realize was society doesn't see it. It's designed. This is a very, very large organization. If you think of the size, the number keeps going up, and the total number being spent or being made in trafficking. They're a business, and their prime motive when they're looking at a Western culture is to not be seen. So, and there's been a shift in their strategy, and they've moved to 2020 saw a massive move into just online, and kids particularly. So what they look for is, how can I get 10 years out of a human being that I can restrain without actually physically restraining? So everything you've seen in movies isn't what they're doing. It's probably less than 1%, the Taken type environment. So you used to say, watch out for strangers. Actually, 80% of the people who are trafficked know their trafficker. And so they actually start building a relationship online. Sometimes it's not the person they're representing. Sometimes it is. They do it in person as well. But they build a relationship. Their purpose is to get kids because they can start removing barriers that would make them susceptible to stop doing the work that they have them doing. So they build often a boyfriend con with girls, so older boys. Build a relationship, and they think their experience is, I'm choosing this.
But, I have to ask, you keep using the word they, and I understand that this is extremely complex because there's so much psychology that goes into it within the grooming and a child and the power balances and all of those types of dynamics at play. But when you say they, do y'all have kind of a fingerprint on, we know predators are? Or is it literally just, as you mentioned, I'm just going to say, males with money, ready to spend money, have fun, and come in for a weekend, do what they want to do, and get out?
Well, there's both sides of they, the buyer. What we find is that they are anybody. They're people you know and you're around. So the buying behavior is kind of an outcrop of pornography through to real life experience, and so since that's prolific, that kind of drives. When we talk about the victims, there are places where you see what you would think, single mothers, like if there's no father in the world, that's a target. Foster families, fostering is a natural execution for them because there's a separation at 18. But the demographics are everywhere. So we've had about 13 executive kids who've been taken and had to get rescued, and that's just not expected. We've had 41 cases of professionals whose kids are either groomed or exited the house. So it's everyone that needs to be aware. And World Cup, what gets really interesting, I heard the DA talk about this in a meeting recently from Fort Bend. The supply challenge, what they're looking at now is, here we are in summer. We got working parents with children who are at home or not, not in a fully supervised environment. That's going to be a target for them. So that's something for everyone to be watching, because this is a summer event. This is June, July.
You talk about those that are being groomed, maybe not aware of what's happening to them. The buyers, and I hate to put it that crass, are they aware what they are buying, or do they think it's just prostitution and they're
right? There's the cultural belief about prostitution. It's always been here. That's one of the things. And then what you see on television. So it's all portrayed fairly inaccurately. And so the experience for the buyers is just like a business. You're creating an experience. And so the women that we know who've come through it, they're told to behave a certain way, to say certain things. So when we're introducing it to people, it's interesting because it's a prolific thing. So how do you introduce this idea? But yes, everything that anybody who's a buyer has been experiencing, they think that they choose it. My wife and I have had survivors live with us. And I asked one of the ladies once, did most of the men think your job was awesome? I said, almost all of them. And I have to tell them that. I have to tell them it's awesome. I have to tell them I'm going through nursing school. I have to tell them all the things that make them feel comfortable. But I am fully trafficked. I'm not keeping the money, and I have had no control of my life for 6 years, that lady.
Your group, redM,
yeah.
What does that stand for?
Well, originally we were, I'm on the board of Redeemed, which is a recovery home up in Spring. And the first day I was on the board, I started redM the next day. The first thing I thought was, we got marketers in town. We could do a really good marketing job for nothing. That's how we started 8 years ago. And so I just put a post on LinkedIn and said, I need marketing muscle to help survivors of sex trafficking. About 52,000 views the next day on LinkedIn. I was like, oh my goodness, people are interested. Gathered 50 people. And we started doing marketing for them. So originally we were Redeemed Marketing, which became redM. After a year, everyone said it's more than Redeemed and it's more than marketing. And so now we've had 5,000 volunteers in Houston who are all professionals with day jobs. We have no employees. We have no buildings. We have no costs. And we ran 180 events we were in 180 events last year. We ran some. We do a big downtown flamenco event. We do our Mexican team did a wrestling event, which was the most fun you can ever have. Most of us gringos were sitting there going, what is this? They said, bring your kids. Really? It's wrestling. But it was a ton of fun. It cost zero. So our whole thing is we're all B2B. We can do things for nothing. We generate money. 80% of our money goes into care organizations. And 20% just keeps us, functioning and always able to support.
How do you fight this problem? Awareness?
So, awareness is the journey. If you look at how people do it, when we started, we got great business people. So the digital team went out and looked and said, oh, this is interesting. Look, the amount of people viewing the content on trafficking equals the amount of people fighting trafficking. No one views this content. It's not something people want to know.
Right.
They think it doesn't relate to them. They think it's either somewhere else or it's another people group than me.
This can't happen to me.
So how do you get to people who don't want to hear it? And the other thing we've learned is lots of people have sexual trauma. Who knew?
Right.
The males don't even know they did, right? But they don't want to talk about the subject. It's uncomfortable. So that's been our fun thing. And that's why redM says nothing about trafficking in it, because we learned if you say anything, religious, political, trafficking, no one's watching, or some people are, but they're wrong. You're not reaching new people. So our whole strategy is how do you get to new people, which is why we have fun events. People go to trafficking events or people who are in the subject. They also have very few friends because it's a dark subject.
Educate this audience and you get them there to come to a wrestling match, a flamenco night.
We don't tell them the whole story. And so we look at, if you look at basically our demographics look like, if we can get 100 people at a really low level of understanding, we only talk to people about your kids. Because now you're in something we all care about. If I'm talking to you about another charity of 1,000 charities that you could be concerned about, I don't want to fight that fight. We have to get to everyone. So we start with your kids. So every story we get of someone that looks like you, they're your kid. But as you can imagine, my kid's at risk. And that's how we do it. And then we don't go deep or dark. Our imagery is never dark. We actually have a hashtag Red Monday. People get the cups online. They order them and they post their cup wherever they are. Look, and every Monday you keep seeing these cups on social media. You don't know what redM is. You're just seeing it, but you stop and you look. The algorithm then feeds you more content. And so it's always fun things we're doing with people. And even though it's a dark subject, we just know people don't come to dark subjects. It's very traumatic, it's very difficult. So then I run my own podcast called The Movement inside of our Join redM channel. And that goes heavy. Like, we bring in people who've been trafficked, we talk about what that experience was like, but we don't encourage everyone to go down that road. So of the 100, we then get 10 people, and because we don't need money, we create volunteer opportunities where if it's too much, you can stop. If an event is too much, we can delay because we don't need money, right? So we're never motivated to have to get people who are volunteers to feel like they got to do this. So then you get 10 lightweight volunteers, and usually of the 100, you'll get one person who's like, I'm really going to do a lot about this. The most organizations are aiming for the one person. They tell them the heavy, dark stuff, and they lose 99 people who now don't want to hear anything.
Right.
So that's our how do you get to people. So we're working an ad campaign right now that will be a national campaign in the summer. That's just CEOs giving us money to do that. They want to see something that will get attention.
We do have a call.
Oh, good.
Chris is on the line from Cyprus. Hello, Chris. Welcome to Hello Houston.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I just had one question. I wanted to find out if there is help and assistance for males that are exploited or trafficked.
Yeah, there is. Actually, there's an organization called Hands of Justice, and they're not a housing environment, but they have groups, and they serve males and females.
Nice. Well, that's got to be as big a problem as for females.
Males are interesting. The demographics look like 30% are male, but what you find is males don't talk.
Mm-hmm.
We believe it's a lot deeper, a lot darker than we know. Males as well, when they engage with children, are younger. So 8 years old is the target age for males right now, whereas girls are about 12 to 14. And that's because they're on gaming systems. Access is really important for traffickers.
And, David, we did get a text. It says, regarding FIFA patriots from other countries like Amsterdam and Europe, but they have different laws on legality of trafficking.
Yep.
Is that going to be a major factor in law enforcement?
It's a huge factor. The law enforcement knows that. In fact, the FIFA, I'm on the Houston group that got FIFA here. They actually were concerned about trafficking. That was something we had to do. We had to go prove that we're just a city that understands it. We're not a city that is prolific, which is how we're sometimes viewed.
Yes.
But lots of fantastic organizations in this city. What FIFA was looking at was when we were looking at who goes to what city, that's the number one question. Where are the Dutch going? Where are anybody who allows prostitution or has it systemically? That's a big factor. So there's going to be an influx of police during the World Cup. What there isn't is an influx of knowledge about how you protect kids and how at risk they are. And that's really, we gathered everyone last summer. So I mean, hotels, airlines, airports. We've done work with the Houston airports to get their numbers up. One of the experience, all hotels have to train people on human trafficking, so they have a video, and that's a legal requirement. Same thing at the airport. They had video training. It was a requirement, but we weren't seeing any cases. And so the airport came to us and said, we're looking at taking the signage down. And that was interesting to us. We're like, we know from the people we know that they're all being trafficked through airports. It's a very normal place for it. Can we do an education piece? So 3 or 4 years back, we did actually an airport education. We built a museum for the people at the airport, and we brought in, actually this is an interesting story. This lady's very prominent in Houston, but we made a series of chairs. There was a red chair that talked about a 10-year-old that was trafficked through IEH every weekend in her childhood. And a lady asked for a picture of me with the chair, and afterwards she said, I was that 10-year-old. And she goes, it's in a book where you got this, but I don't talk about it. So she started talking. That's what turned the airport. Once the employees had that story, she had her unaccompanied minor pass. So she just looked like a regular Houstonian. For everyone to understand what it can be anyone, similar to the third profile, which is the people trafficking. Sure, there are people who look like traffickers trafficking, but we're seeing, pastors, doctors, dentists. We're seeing, if you just search, I actually have a slide I made just gathering every profession I could think of, and you find it, people trafficking. We've seen teachers in Houston, and so it's you can't just say this is what a trafficker looks like. So there's a lot of education particularly on understanding social media for parents.
And that's what I was going to say, David. I understand, again, this is very complex. There's a lot of education. If you could leave our community with one sound advice, what would that be as we get ready? We're 100 days out of FIFA. We can all be aware in what way?
I would say number one right now, who do your kids talk to online?
Who do your kids talk to online?
And they'll say, this is my device, my privacy. You're paying for that device. And it's because all their friends are allowed to do stuff. So you'll see that. They have apps. We've seen there's a calculator app that's a chat app that kids use. We had one kid in the Woodlands, a pastor's daughter, no social media, no online, being groomed through her mother's Bible app as a chat feature.
Wow. And, I almost want to encourage anybody, even if you're not just a parent, but if you have a young person in your life, be vigilant.
Let me say something exciting about that. If you're a grandparent, an aunt, or an uncle, you have more chance of reaching kids than a parent.
Yep.
So you guys go talk.
That's right.
I was at a church training the other day, and there was an 11-year-old there. And I asked the parents, it was a firefighter and police parents, and I said, can I talk to your daughter? I got down to her level. And because they were training about trafficking like it's someone else, and here's an 11-year-old. So I said, do your friends have older boyfriends? And she smiled and said, yes. And I said to the parents, that's how trafficking happens.
David Reid is the founder of the redM movement. Thank you so much for joining us today with this important information. Coming up, how locals want to revamp the oldest AIDS memorial site in the country. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
You got your TV medical dramas, and then you've got the TV medical drama.
That's your experience when you're in the ER. You don't know what that doctor had for breakfast. You just show up and you hope to God he's going to save you, And I think it made it much more realistic.
I'm Kyle Rizdal. We go to the pit next time on Marketplace.
You can hear Marketplace at 6:30 this evening here on News 88.7.
On the next Fresh Air, Morgan Neville talks about his new documentary, Men on the Run. It's about Paul McCartney after the breakup of the Beatles. Neville's made documentaries about Fred Rogers, Pharrell, and Orson Welles. He won an Oscar and a Grammy for his film 20 Feet from Stardom about backup singers. Join us.
You can hear Fresh Air tonight at 8 on News 88.7. Comes from listeners like you and from CertaPro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management, estimates and more at CertaPro.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Alley Theater, presenting Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, a comedy about mistaken identities and romantic entanglements. March 6th through 29th. Tickets at alleytheater.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
The Texas AIDS Memorial Garden, located along the Columbia Tap Trail in Houston's 3rd Ward, which is basically off 288 in McGregor, is one of the oldest AIDS memorials in the United States. It was created in 1986 by architect R. Michael Lee. The garden was built to honor the memories of his friends and loved ones that lost their lives during the height of the AIDS crisis. Today, local nonprofit Friends of Columbia Tap, along with community volunteers, have been working to preserve and restore the garden, in addition to advancing a larger vision for its future. So to tell us more about the Texas AIDS Memorial Garden and this effort, we're joined by the garden's architect and founder, R. Michael Lee, and Edward D. Pettitt, Jr., president of Friends of Columbia Tap. Michael and Edward, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you.
So you really started this 40 years ago.
Yes, and I may get kind of choked up when I talk about it.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Because it brings up a lot of bad memories. Sure. In 1985, I bought a house over in Riverside Terrace, I guess my third house over there. Mm-hmm. And this one backed up to an old railroad right-of-way. And Ed probably can go more into the history of the railroad, why it was there. But my history kind of starts in 1985. And actually, I could look out my bathroom window, and I was eye level with the engineer when they drive by. Mm-hmm. And then by the end of 1985, 1986, they pull up all the tracks and abandon the railroad right-of-way completely. Mm-hmm. And when it was abandoned, it has became a source for any illegal dumping, any local fraternity, which was a kind of a wild fraternity, SAE house. They would use it for parking for wild parties, and they had these things called swamp parties, and the entire neighborhood would be inundated with these huge party goers, and even fire trucks couldn't even get through.
Yeah,
that's how massive these parties were, and it became almost actually with those parties I had to sleep in the closet because it was so noisy, and so I decided I needed to do something. I basically built a retaining wall out of concrete riprap, and I started gardening. And I have a kind of an epithet. I say I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I garden.
I love that.
So
it's beautiful.
I had so many friends dying of AIDS, and I don't know if you can go back to 1986, what it was like. And I can remember the first time I got tested, I didn't know if I was going to live or die. It was basically, the results could be that. And I had so many creative writers and architects, designers that were all just dying around me. And there was that atmosphere in Houston and probably throughout the rest of the United States and the world that gay people were pariahs and you just don't touch them. You don't touch the same doorknob that they touched. The medical center didn't want them in the Texas Medical Center, so they built, they converted some old hotel or something off of 45 into a place for AIDS patients. So it was just so much negative atmosphere that you just had to retreat to yourself.
Did your garden become your retreat?
That was my retreat.
And so now people can go as well. Is that from what I understand? Talk to us about what's happening now and what it represents today.
Well, what it represents today is that there's a website that was put together by a Chinese group, and it lists all the AIDS memorials in the entire world. And I think I counted, it was like 157 of them. And Dallas has 3, Galveston has 1. Chicago has built a huge AIDS memorial, and Houston has none. And that's a frightening part, that Houston, as diverse as it is, has not embraced an AIDS memorial garden. Mm-hmm. And this has been on the books now at least since it was dedicated by the Gays, which is the Garden and Yard Society, in 2002, when we erected a monument and had a dedication, for the garden. Yeah. And since then, the history got very checkered. Mm-hmm. For 20 years, I basically maintained a garden, and it was beautiful, and it was full of color, crepe myrtles, daylilies, echinacea.
Let me just jump in here before we run out of time. Edward, what is the status of the garden today then?
So I first met Michael in 2022 when we were hosting our first annual Third Ward on Tap Festival on the Columbia Tap Trail. And that was when we had formed this group called Friends of Columbia Tap, because we wanted to transform this former railroad built by enslaved labor to ship sugar and cotton from Brazoria County to Houston as a way to mend the community, a community that was divided by highways, by railroad tracks, by redlining. And I was going up and down the trail, and my favorite section of the trail was the A's Memorial Garden, because it had a mature canopy, it had these bioswales full of wetland creatures, and I looked up the information about how it started, and I found out where Michael lived, I literally just knocked on his door one day. I was like, Michael, we just formed this group. We love your garden. We're wondering why the city hasn't recognized it officially through the Parks Department. And he said, well, it came from a source of pain. When he started the garden in the 1980s, people who had AIDS or people suspected the LGBT community were pariahs. And, folks at the Civic Club meeting or at the City Hall Council meetings wouldn't even sit next to him. And I said, well, this is a new age, Michael. We need to try again. And so we went to our council member, Dr. Carolyn Evans Shabazz for District D. She got us in touch with the mayor's office of then Mayor Sylvester Turner. And on his last day in office, he issued an official proclamation for the garden.
Amazing. How can people find out more about the garden?
Well, I think Ed has got a website. I used to run had a website.
Yeah.
Basically,
Ed, quickly,
what
the
is
website.
FriendsofColumbiaTap.org.
FriendsofColumbiaTap.org. Our Michael Lee is the architect and founder of the Texas AIDS Memorial Garden. Edward D. Pettitt II is the president of the local nonprofit Friends of Columbia Tap.
And we'll be out there for our 5th annual festival, March 28th.
March 28th. Mark that. Michael, Edward, thank you both for joining us today, and thank you so much for that beautiful garden.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our show. We've literally just run out of time, and we want to thank you for watching and listening to Hello Houston. We will be back tomorrow with more conversations. We're also heading for a live broadcast at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo tomorrow. So if you're planning on being there, come by, stop by. We'll be there from 11 to 1. Be sure, stop by. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altine, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
KUHF Houston.
And science. Learn more at mathworks.com.
From NPR and WBUR Boston, I'm Indira Lakshmanan.
I'm Robin Young. It's Here and Now. Coming up, today is day 5 of the Iran war, and today Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this.
We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating.
We'll get the latest analysis.
Also, the Republicans will have a bitter runoff in the Texas Senate primary. Here's State Attorney General Ken Paxton.
We are not going to go quietly, and we are not going to let you buy the seat.
Also, the first case of mass mail-in voting in the U.S. was in 1864, and just like today, it was controversial.
I think we imagine we invented everything in the 21st century, but these are very old stories.
Coming up, Here and Now.
The news is first.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The Pentagon has released the names of 4 of the 6 U.S. soldiers killed by an Iranian drone strike on Sunday. They served with a command based out of Des Moines, Iowa. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is stepping up its attacks against Iran. NPR's Quill Lawrence has more.